same things that got you successful initially are not going to be the same things that continue to make you successful. There's so much fear, I think, associated with, or lack of action around, the unknown.
Real estate professionals, welcome back. You're home here with us at rmgagentpodcast.com. So excited that you're back here for this, another edition of our Master Series. So Jake and I have a really good personal friend that I had the opportunity to interview. Who did we talk to?
I was not there for it. You talked to Keith Riddle. Keith's a really good friend. He's also kind of an OG real estate guru within this area. I think guru is maybe a good term for him. He's somebody that before I came to the business that I'm in now, I saw from afar. And then as I got to get to know him better, like you realize the genius that he actually has. And so Keith is a good friend, but also, you know, somebody that should be looked up to.
Yeah, so this is, Keith's become a good friend of both of ours. He's kind of a philosopher, and he has a wealth of knowledge in the industry. And when I had the chance to interview Keith, you get to hear somebody who's done so many different things across our industry, such a huge breadth of experience. But you'll hear what you hear with everybody, and that is you got to start small and you got to focus and you got to get really good at that one hard thing. And so this was a two-part series. Keith and I just we talked and then just the good stuff kept on rolling, so we kept on filming. So this is part one of our interview with the Keith Riddle. So we go way back. I met you in New Orleans, what was that, maybe 18 years ago now?
Yeah, sounds about right.
It was a long time ago.
A long time ago, yeah.
So you were early on one of my mentors, right? I remember I was scratching my head trying to figure out how to do this whole real estate thing, and I just clearly remember I was sitting with at dinner with you and two other friends, and you were ahead of me on your leadership journey, and you just said something to me which was basically, you can. And I just remember feeling so silly that I felt like I needed somebody's permission to do what I wanted to do.
Right.
But I did, and you were that guy.
Well, I think you use that term mentor loosely, which I appreciate. But that was, it feels like a lifetime ago. And it also in some way, shape or form feels like yesterday.
Yeah.
So I've been doing this almost 20 years.
Man.
And that's I never thought I'd ever say that about anything.
Right.
So, maybe marriage. Hopefully marriage.
Yes, yeah.
I love you.
Yes, yeah, totally.
I love you.
Yeah, your wife is wonderful.
Yeah. So much nicer than me. But yeah, so that was almost 20 years ago, 18 years ago.
Yeah, it was a long time. So, you know, whenever we do these interviews, a lot of times it's about somebody's story, and stories resonate with people. That's why we share them so much. But, you know, the only people that I'm interviewing, I have, you know, the thing about doing a podcast is you get to put people in the seat that you genuinely, deeply, you know, say, I want people to listen to this person. Right. And so there's this element of, you know, hopefully the audience trusts me that I'm putting people in the seats like, you should listen to this person. But from your mouth, if I were just to ask you, like, why should somebody listen to you? What would you say? And
I wrestle with that question quite a bit. Maybe you shouldn't. But I think that just the journey, right? Like, I'm not going to say I've done it all, but I've been through a lot, and that includes a vast variety of, I was a real estate agent. I worked for another gentleman on his team. I started to work on my own, and I built a team, but then I've also done investments and just been around the block, from commercial stuff to land development stuff to fix and flips to holding a rental portfolio to running really a real estate team, being an agent, and then going independent and building a brokerage.
Yeah.
So not to say I've done it all, but like I've touched a lot of things, and I've been through a lot in what I would say is an interesting time in real estate, right? I wasn't alive in a lot of the other times, but I got in 2004, 2005, had enough, you know, runway to get myself a lot of experience in a short amount of time because the market was fire. Mm-hmm. So I got a lot of reps out early. Is the way I say it to people. I don't know, and don't have to dive into it, but the average real estate agent sells X amount of houses a year. And so if you sell 5 houses a year, 10 houses a year, in 10 years, you know, you've sold 100 homes or 50 homes. I was selling 30, 40, 50 homes a year in the first 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And so you got those reps out, got a ton of experience, and then experienced one of the largest crashes that real estate, that I know of, that real estate's ever gone through. Came out of that, had this great highway of success, which, was it us? Was it the market? Was it, what was it? And then also now I've been back through another downturn again. So I've been through a couple of downturns. I've done a lot of stuff. So, I mean, I don't know this. I would say somebody should listen to me other than just experience.
Yeah. So one of the things you said that piqued my interest is, you have done so many things inside of real estate, right? Real estate is multiple disciplines, and I can just see in my mind an agent like leaning forward and be like, I want to do development too, or I want to do this, or I want to do this, and like I just internally like cringe, right?
Well, and the reason I say I wrestle with that question, and I didn't really get to the backside of it, but the reason I wrestle with that question is because as of recently, and even just going through my journey, at some point in time, you start to mentor or coach or train or teach other people the business. And when I was growing an organization, not only did that include agents, that also include staff, right? Yeah. Hiring assistants, hiring admin help, hiring file transaction coordinators. And all of that is a growth journey because you can be a good agent, you can be a bad boss. You can be a great boss and a great operator and not necessarily be a good real estate agent, And so when I say the reason I wrestle with that question a lot is because I don't know that people should listen to me about a lot of things that they maybe need to know in their business, like leadership stuff or hiring and training or consulting. Like that's maybe not why you should listen to me. I don't know that somebody should like, hey, listen to me about how to build a great team, right? Like I've done that, but I don't know that that's my strength. Right? Like I don't know that's the reason that someone should listen to me. I think people could listen to me because I can just usually hear where they're at or what they're doing, and I can provide a lot of insight into my experiences in that arena, but I don't know that like I've mastered certain aspects of it to say you should blanket listen to me in all facets of your real estate business because you should not.
Sure, I totally get that, yeah. What if you were to like look at your personal recipe for accomplishing all the things you've accomplished, what's in the mix?
And that's another interesting question, and I'm going to answer a lot of these questions out of both sides of my mouth. and it's because of the journey, and I'm going to kind of lean back on that. But I don't think it's any secret to anybody who's had a certain amount of success or been in the industry for a while to know that the same things that got you successful initially are not going to be the same things that continue to make you successful because the playing field changes. Yeah. And so when you start talking about specific qualities or attributes that made me successful, a lot of it was taking control of a situation, working extremely hard, putting in, whatever time was necessary, but you also can't scale that way, right? Sure. Like you can work 60, 70 hours a week, but now are you going to work 140 a week? Like at some point, those same attributes that I think made me successful in my first 5 to 7 years of business, which was extreme amounts of work, and working really hard and taking control of the situation, getting in over my head and knowing I could have the confidence to figure things out and leading people through example, kind of being in the trenches with my people and my team, are the same thing that have limited me or that have had me reach capacity or hit a ceiling in my career because all of a sudden it's like, well, you can't just lead everybody by telling them not to be a weenie and to get out there and do it, right? Like, and I'm like, that'll resonate with 10 people in your life.
Yeah.
It's not going to resonate with everybody. And so then that's where you have to kind of start swapping your skill sets around and go, how do I become a better coach or a consultant? How do I start to listen instead of talk, right? And so a lot of the things that I think is just, if I'm going to boil it down, is extreme amounts of hard work, and then I have a really high tolerance for risk. So being able to make the tough calls when the tough calls need to be made, and to lay the chips on the table, right? Yeah. And so I've done that a variety of times, and I think that has gotten me very successful. And I also think that it has lost me a lot of money, or not even lost me, but held me back from making additional income in areas. So I don't know.
Where did the risk tolerance come from? Because that's, it's a key just for anybody who's going to work commission job to begin with.
Right.
But where did it come from?
I think the risk tolerance came from starting with nothing. Is one. A lot of people like to tell their rags to riches stories or whatever, but ultimately when I got into real estate, I was a broke college kid. I had maybe, $500 to my name. I was working 2 or 3 jobs, like waiting tables, tuning skis, working on my family's farm, and just, living hand to mouth while I was getting through college. And that's when I got into real estate. So I wasn't really this fear-based person. Like I didn't have a whole lot to lose, right? Like, so even like as year 2, 3, 4, 5, when I started to develop substantial amounts of cash flow and income, pushing those chips in wasn't hard for me because it was like, where am I going, right? Where I was another 36 months ago, like back to, because I had the confidence I could do it again.
Yeah.
And once my eyes were kind of open to the industry and I saw how the money was made and I saw who was doing what I wanted to do, I just had that innate confidence of like, I could do it.
Yeah.
You know? And the other thing I would say is my background is, most of my family is farmers. I'm a big proponent of farming, and my older brother still farms, and my dad's a farmer, and my grandpa's. But in that world, one of the things that I didn't understand until later in life is farming is one of those things where you can do everything right and lose.
Oh, yeah.
Legitimately, right? You can plant at the right time, you can water at the right time, you can fertilize at the right time, and some other country will put an embargo on some other country and wheat prices fall or whatever, and so... And the flip side is true too, right? You can get it in a little late. You can not do what you should have done, and the yield might be down, but all of a sudden there's a drought in the Midwest and bumper crop. And so I think it's easy to fool yourself in that industry because sometimes your wins are not you, right?
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes your losses are not your fault. But the story it told me growing up was basically like there are certain things that are in your control. There are certain things that are outside your control. What's in my control is my ability to work really hard, assess opportunities and risk, make the shots that I think I can make, and let the chips fall where they fall.
Yeah.
And I think that growing up on a farm and just seeing like, hey man, it can go any way, but what you need to do regardless, you're never going to win if you don't get up in the morning and put your boots on. You're never going to win if you don't plant your crops at some point. You're never going to win if you don't. So there's certain fundamental things that you had to do to be successful as a real estate agent, and that was prospecting, it was database management, it was lead follow-up, right? It was open houses. So those kind of grassroots things to me just never went away. And so I knew no matter what the risk was, I could always fall back because the fundamentals are going to work in any market.
Sure.
The fundamentals are going to work at any point in time.
Yeah.
It's a contact sport. And so that was one of those things.
It's not fun to hear, by the way.
I don't know, we're here to have fun. It is called job, right? It is called work. And it should be fun. But that's the other thing about, like, again, I'll go back to that farming analogy is like, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I think that real estate can also be a lifestyle.
Yeah, I
right?
think so.
Like when you choose real estate as a career or profession, if you're going to do this full time, it becomes your lifestyle. And so with that, there's the good and the bad. And I think a lot of times we like to focus on the fun and the good and not do the stuff that's, no one wants to go shovel out the pig pen.
Right.
But someone's going to have to do it, or you decide not to raise pigs, right? Like at some point in time, like you said, that has to get done too, and it's not glamorous and it's not fun, but it's a part of, hey, I got to live this really cool lifestyle as a farmer or as a real estate agent, and I get all these good things that come with it, and I got to go over here and I got to like shovel the
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. I love the contrast because, sometimes when we hear stories that are outside of our vertical, it just makes more sense. And it's like if a farmer came to you and said, I have this great idea, I'm going to farm, but I'm not going to sow seed. Somebody has a product that told me that I don't have to go sow seed and I will still reap the harvest.
And I think that that's probably one of, there's a lot I could unpack there because my older brother is a farmer, like I said. And in my real estate career, he was doing his farming career, and there were those conversations, right? And just because we were both, I would say pseudo entrepreneurial, but I'm like, I had good ideas. Like, hey man, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a satellite team in another market, and I'm going to, and he did that. He was like, hey man, there's this crop I've been hearing about, or I went to this conference, and I would say 90% of those end poorly for both of us, right?
Yeah.
But it is that sometimes we get away from the things that work because they're more fun or sexy than the things that work.
Yeah.
So there is that aspect of it. And I do think that partially why the real estate industry is where it is, and one of the reasons that I think that we should share these conversations is because what I've seen over the last 20 years is a degradation of the real estate agent, primarily by the real estate agent, by choosing to outsource their items of value to third parties.
Yeah.
So I'm going to outsource my lead generation. I'm going to outsource my marketing. So while there's so much power in leverage, and that's one of the conversations that we're constantly having is like, hey man, don't do minimum wage work, like dollar per hour stuff. Like, but there's also if you outsource all of the things that you do or you do well or that are pinnacle to who you are, pretty soon like you are the middleman, right?
Yeah,
like you are the minimum wage worker. Because your costs come up and your profit goes down. I mean, I think we've both been there, or I've been there.
Oh yeah.
And that's the difference between I sold 400 houses this year, I sold 300 houses the year before. How come I made more money the year before selling 300?
Right.
instead of selling 400. Well, I hired more staff, or I'll leverage, and maybe it's good and maybe it's bad, and we all have to draw those lines. But that's one of the things that I think brand new agents, or when I say new agents, I mean agents under like 5 years. I would say leverage as little as you possibly can until you need to.
Sure.
And I think that most people leverage as soon as they can.
Yeah.
It's not a need, it's a can.
Yep.
I'm at the point right now where I can pay for leads. I'm at the point right now where I can pay for file transaction coordination. I'm at the point where I can pay, but do you really need a TC if you're only doing 2 files a month?
Right.
I mean, and that's not bad volume. I mean, if you're doing 24 units a year as a solo agent, but I don't think you need someone to handle your files for you.
Right.
Necessarily, right? Maybe you do. I'm just saying that definitely is something I've seen in the industry, and I think it's hamstringed a lot of agents' growth because they get in this industry and they look at the people around them and they don't have this leverage and they've outsourced stuff, and so then they're like, well, I'm going to do that too as soon as I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a great observation, and my observation along that is we have this tendency, if we're not paying attention, to outsource our core competencies and outsource the highest dollar productive things because they're flat out the hardest. Like and once you do that, you're actually left with the things that, they don't pay so well.
Right.
Right. And then you're shocked, right? Like, well, what happened?
Well, and I just think it's a cancer in the industry as far as I can tell. And that's one of the things where if I'm talking to younger agents, it's like, listen, learn through doing before you leverage, first of all.
Yeah.
And then when you do leverage, it needs to be a need basis, not a want basis.
I love it. So I want to go back to this risk thing because there's a moment in time where risk seems not so risky because it's like, I don't got nothing.
Right?
Right?
Yeah. No,
well,
that's why I first started risking it all.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything to lose. I didn't have much. Yeah.
You fast forward 15, 16 years into your career, you and I are at Marabou, right? We're coming out of a meeting, standing outside the bar, and the whole world's about ready to get flipped upside down, and we don't know if that's true or not. And, it was like the day before, all of a sudden, COVID shut everything down.
Yeah.
And now risk is real because you're in the last 20 years or 15 years of work is at risk. How do you navigate that?
It's so funny you say that because, first of all, let me precursor. One of the questions you asked earlier is about my experience. And one of the things I would say I did really early on in my career is I started investing. And I started investing when I was maybe an agent for a year or two. And it wasn't, anything crazy. It was just, buying my first renovation property, or it was just buying a rental property. Now, fast forward, right, when COVID happened and we're walking out of there, and that did happen, I did have one of those lose it all type moments mentally, right? I can remember distinctly having a conversation with my wife when the great governor of our state came out on TV and said, people didn't have to pay their mortgage or tenants didn't have to pay rent.
Oh, man.
And I had a rental portfolio of 50 plus properties. I don't know if anybody's ever tried to float 50 mortgages by themselves, but my assumption is you can't float them very long if the people living in them aren't paying you. And my real estate brokerage was shutting down, right? Like initially, agents got deemed essential very quickly, but initially it was like you couldn't show houses, you couldn't write contracts. So my bread and butter income was gone potentially. I was potentially looking at carrying a massive load. And so, I had that moment. And it was weird because going through that moment, I couldn't go and be like, so what, I lose it all. I'm not going very far back. I was like, no, this is going to ruin, 10, 15 years of my work potentially. But I also was like, it's not out of my control. Again, it's going back to that control what you can control. There's things in your control and there's things that aren't. That was out of my control. And so I kind of shrugged it off and you're like, well, if this is how it goes, this is how it goes. But I got to get up tomorrow and I got to make a game plan. And so that game plan for me was I went and I leaned a little bit towards the investment side of things. I initially knew that the world was freaking out and I was freaking out and I was like, I can't sit in my house. I can't do nothing. I just can't. I'm not that person. So I'm going to buy a renovation house or two. And I'm gonna fix them up, and I know I can do the work myself, and I could just drive to the house and work by myself and not have to see anybody. And COVID lockdown, and I knew that house prices were probably going to come down, or at least I thought they were.
Sure.
But I knew that they weren't going to just fall to rock bottom, and I can buy at margin. So fast forward, that story is I started calling around to investors, wholesalers, flippers that I knew, and just saying, hey, put a bug in your ear. I might be looking for a project if you got anything, and plan on buying a couple of them. And I ended up buying, I think, 5 houses in 2 weeks. And then my door was getting knocked down for the next month with people, hey, have you seen this one? Have you seen this? And so I was like, okay. So I went full scale that direction primarily, and started flipping houses right and left. And then, of course, real estate agents were deemed essential. The market didn't crash, and then the market kept doing this.
The market went just crazy.
And then the next thing I know, I was managing a full-scale real estate firm, a full-scale flipping operation, and a full-scale license and bonded contracting company, and that was awful. It was a lot of fun. But it was also the pendulum swung hard the other way when the market didn't crash. It's like my plan worked too well, apparently. But no, I think going back to that risk conversation that's kind of, and I think I'm talking about my personal stories, and I'm trying to think on the fly about other stories that I've heard or read. But I think if you read enough books and you hear enough people's stories, you do hear this underlying theme of people who lost it all at some point, whether they were presidents of the United States or whether they were business people or whoever. And people know Dale Carnegie's name, but then when you hear Dale Carnegie's story, or, it's like there's ups and downs to it. And if you can't take or stomach the down, then you won't risk much.
Right.
And so I think for me, just that kind of more stoic outlook on things, like there's things in my control, there's things out of my control. I could do it all right and still lose. There could be another COVID something in another 15 years when maybe I'm built even more than I have now, and that could get pulled out from under me. But I can't let that fear dictate my action.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest hurdle with people and fear, is that fear is typically paralyzing. Sure. Right? They call it fight or flight, right? Yeah. But you either run from it or you freeze. And so I think it takes a unique person, and or what I would say is it takes a lot of work interpersonally and mentally on your mindset and how you look at things and how you view the world and how you shape problems to be able to see fear, see risk, and move forward. Yeah. And move forward with confidence. Yeah. And move forward quickly.
It's so interesting because I think, in the history of the world, it's less than 100 years that we've had this illusion of security, right? Like I can get enough insurance that if I die, everybody in my world's taken care of times 3. Right. I can get insurance if I am for my house, for my car, if I'm not able to work. Like I can, on the outside, I can buffer my entire life from all risk, but that's not real.
No, it's not real. And understand too that I think the world preys on that. We're sold so much stuff because of fear. Yeah. What if, right?
Oh,
the insurance conversation, the whatever. And I think that's another problem is we have people that are using our fear against us every day to help secure their position or sell us stuff. And so it's tough, man. You got to learn to navigate who you are. What is my appetite for risk? What am I comfortable with? But then you also need to, I think, over the time through personal development and personal growth, say, hey, if I have a low risk tolerance, and that's one of the things that's holding me back from achieving what I want to achieve or going where I want to go, I might need to do some stuff that's not tangibly in my business, but on myself, that's going to allow me to deal with risk differently or get in relationship with people who will help me through those things so that I can go and even continue to grow the business that I already know how to grow.
Sure. Yeah.
Just because I'm not scared of it going somewhere, or I'm not scared of what might happen if it does.
Yeah.
Right?
No, absolutely.
Failure to launch, so to speak.
There's just so much stuff around that, right? And fear, it's amazing. Like we live in this environment of constant fear, not because of what could possibly happen.
Yeah.
And you just think about what's the level of my intake in that. How does that impact my parenting as a leader, as a real estate professional? All areas of life. And if you were watching this right now, and there's a real estate agent right now that's watching this, and they're paralyzed by fear. Mm-hmm. Right.
There's a lot of them right now.
A lot. The vast majority.
And I don't think there's any guilt in that. If that's you, that's fine. Don't feel guilty about it, but own it. Say, oh, hey, that's me. I'm not doing the things I should be doing, or I haven't been for the last 6 months, or I don't know what to do, and I'm scared. Mm-hmm. Don't make an excuse around it. Just own it. Yeah. But now what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Right?
There's this, because I think, in the last 2 years, I've lost more sleep than about business than I have in probably the last decade before.
Yeah.
right? And
I can think of the last time I did, and it was during the last downturn.
yeah.
Like, and I had those
Exactly.
moments literally, in the last 2 years or something where I was not sleeping well or stressed out or whatever. And I remember one night being like, damn it, dude, I haven't felt this way since like the last time I felt this way, which was like the last time it was like, this could all go sideways. I don't know. That there's a big part of being out over your skis that's extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then there's also a big part of that is where a lot of growth happens.
Yeah, it's funny because it's, like if I look at you from the outside in, it's like, here's somebody who doesn't have fear. Like Keith doesn't struggle with fear. Is that real?
No, I think it's not that you don't have fear. It's that you don't let fear dictate your actions. And I think about like all these, war movies or something where you see like, World War I or World War II, and you see like the salty general like walking through the trenches, like knocking, and like bombs are going off and stuff's hitting them in the head, and they're not even like phased, right?
Yeah,
like a bullet hits right in front of them, and they don't even go like this and then start talking. They just keep talking, and you're like, but they kind of just are like, listen, if I get shot in the head, it's going to happen. Like, I can't flinch every time something.
Yeah.
And so while that's an extreme example of, but I think in your business, it's the same way. Or I think even interpersonally, like say, going to your parenting and this and that. One of the things that I'm really convicted committed to with my children is teaching them at some point in their life and throughout their life to learn to think without fear. Not to not be afraid.
Yeah.
And not to not give that fear the onus it needs. Like, hey, if you have fear, there's a reason you should listen to that or dig into that for a minute. But don't dig into it too long. And once you've dug into it once or twice, then you can say, okay, that fear thing's creeping in about this situation, like an uncomfortable conversation. But I know through experience that for me to go where I want to go and to get other people where they want to go, I need to have uncomfortable conversations. So I've had them in the past. This is going to be uncomfortable, but I need to go talk to Johnny tomorrow and have a real uncomfortable conversation. Yeah. And I'm afraid to do it. I don't want to do it, but I know that I need to do it. And so I'm going to go do that even though I'm afraid of doing that because I've lived through that experience of just knowing good things come out of me facing that fear.
Yeah.
And so I'm super committed to teaching that to my kids.
I love it.
Trying to teach that to my agents because, the perception can just be someone's fearless.
Yeah.
And there probably are some people that have, like I said, I think when you have a higher tolerance or higher risk tolerance than other people, it can definitely appear that way.
Well, there's situations that you or I could walk into right now and have no fear, and everybody else is fearful. It's because I had that fear before, and I already had to fight it.
Right.
Right.
So it's not that you're not fearful. It's just that you don't let the fear dictate your decisions when you are. And there's probably a lot of times where you're not as fearful as a lot of people around you because you've just faced so many of those situations that were similar, or had relation to them. So
the mental picture that I have is when I was in the military. I remember when you would be at a meeting, right? And so you have the colonel or the major or the general or whoever's at the head of the table and all the people that matter,
right?
And then
somehow you found yourself in the room.
Yeah, and I was like, they're like, Aaron Moore, you need to be in this room. But I wasn't ever at the table. I was on the back wall, and it was like, sit down, shut up, and just watch.
Yeah.
And the mental model is, does fear have the seat at the table? The fear will be in the room.
Sure.
But is fear at the table? Is it running the meeting?
Yeah.
Or is it sit down, shut up, and sit in the back?
Yeah. So when I look at like I said, the kind of the qualities or attributes that I'm trying to teach my children or that have come from my business, one is to be able to think without fear, or face fear and think without fear. The other one that comes down to it is just initiative, right? And initiative is kind of a broad word, but also in my organization, we just have a phrase, figure it out.
Yeah.
Figure it out. As Mike Stinger likes to say, he said, have you tried trying? That's always, anytime someone starts to complain about something, he's like, well, have you tried trying? Right? And I would always say, figure it. And it's that is another quality or attribute that I think has really helped me. But I also see when I look at a body of agents, the ones that really start to pull away are not the ones who can do what they need to do when everything that is needing to be done is known.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's a time in your career when someone's like, hey, Reed, I'm going to throw you a bone. I got a client. I'm leaving town. He wants to see this one house Saturday. If he likes it, write it up. And you're like, cool. And you go show that house Saturday and they want to buy it. And you're like, holy crap, I don't know how to write this up, right? Yeah. Like, I don't even know how to structure a deal. But that goes away relatively quickly. You start writing some contracts. So now it's like, now you know how to do it. And now it's like, hey, Reed, I got a client coming town. You're like, great. You go write the deal. But a lot of agents, I think, can do those basics, right? Like they can do the basics of like, can you write a contract? Yes. Can you hold a deal together? Yes. But what happens when you're faced with a situation where it's not clear, or there is no like letter of the law, or it's not in the contract. And that's, I think, when you start to see agents shine, as well as you start to see other people shrink. And I learned that really, really quickly as an agent, was in a transaction, there's me, and maybe there's the couple or the people I'm working with. There's another agent on the other side. There's another couple. There's a lender. There's a title person. And all of a sudden, something happens, and there's 8 people sitting here, and 7 of them are like, oh man.
Get small.
Right.
Small.
Like, you know, like, and so it's like, who's going to step up and be like, I can solve this problem, or I'll dig into this, or I'll go down to the county, or I'll ask the question. And so that ability, that kind of figure it out, that tenacity to kind of go into areas of uncomfortability, or even not even like, it's like, sometimes it's not even hard. It's just, there's so much fear, I think, associated with, or lack of action around the unknown.
Right.
I've never split a parcel in half. So I know this house has a parcel that can be split up. I don't know how to do that. Yeah. I'm just not going to do it.
Right.
I don't want to figure that out.
Yeah.
And yet, time on task over time, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years later, when people say, hey, Keith, how did you do this or how do you do that? It's like a lot of it's come down to looking at the same deals a lot of people looked at and just figuring them out.
Sure.
Doing the hard work to figure out and go, I'm going to go in here and get a black eye, and I'm going to get bloody, or I'm going to look stupid, or I'm going to make a mistake. But that's going to make me an extra $150,000 on this flip. Because I bought it, I fixed it, I turned it, I parceled another lot off,
and
I sold it, and everyone else would have just cleared 30 grand and walked away.
Yeah.
You know, so some of that, people mix creativity, but the tenacity to dive into that.
Yeah.
And I see that in my agent buddies, and that's another thing I want to teach my kids is like, half of life is not knowing, right? And half of the people in life that tell you they know are lying, or they're giving you bad information. So that they definitely need to learn to control their fear, think without fear, not let their fear, you know. And then they also need to know they have a personal responsibility to figure things out in their life. And to figure out the things in their life for themselves and for their own families and for other people, right? And that's part of the leadership thing that we sign up for as well. Is when you lead an organization, that lands usually on you.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people, you know, and that's, I think the word that people use is talent, right? But it's like when you find a person and you hire a person and they can do what you ask them to do, that's awesome.
Yeah.
If they can't show up on time, they can't do the work, you know, but it's also really, really awesome, or you know you found talent when someone goes, hey, I'm going to work for you. I'm going to do all the things you ask. I'm also going to figure out all these little things that I don't like, or I'm going to figure out all these little problems that are coming to you that I can get in front of. That's a special person.
Yeah.
You know?
It makes me think, I'm hearing you process that. It makes me think the idea of I know is very limiting. Yeah. The idea of I'll figure it out, endless possibilities.
Yeah.
Endless possibilities.
Well, and that's where, you can see it time and time and time and time again, but that's all of the stories that we probably hear of the mega wealthy or people who've done really well in business. It's like, figuring out electric cars when no one's figured out electric cars, figuring out rockets when no one's figured out rockets, you know. Elon just has a high tolerance for risk, but he's figuring out things that a lot of people have either maybe tried or maybe just stopped, Amazon, Bezos, like all these things, like how the shipping, like the logistics that they've had to figure out to make it and everyone knows it's a good idea.
Right.
But they're going to trudge into the unknown and they're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think that's, not only is that endless as far as possibilities, it's endless as far as potential,
right?
As far as wealth or income or success, right? The biggest wins are not going to be from the people who can do the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah,
necessarily.
Well, and even just thinking about, I was telling an agent, a few agents this morning, right? I've been in this industry now almost 25 years, and I might know 20% of what there is to know, and that might be incredibly generous. The issue isn't that, it's this, in our industry, one of the things that's so attractive about it, that also has a level of risk to it, is almost every transaction I'm going to do, almost every situation I'm going to get myself into, there's something that's going to fall into, I don't know, but I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's, if you don't have that posture, especially when things get tough and maybe the opportunities are more rare, that's gonna.
And it's almost going into it with that expectation, right? Not going into situations with your blinders on. And I've done it in the investment world, probably has been the most costly, but even in the hiring world, where you go to a class, they teach you about how behavior works and behavioral profiling and building a job description where you can find a person who's a behavioral match and you can write the job description and all the tasks and you're like, great, I'm going to hire someone. They're going to do these things. They have the natural, and it's going to work.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't, right? And then you get in this world where some people will never try it. Some people will try it, fail, and then never try it again. Some people will try it, fail, and then continue to fail that same way over and over and over. I mean, I have friends in the industry who've had 7 executive assistants. And I'm like, I feel like the fact that everyone keeps leaving you every 3 years.
There's one common thing in this equation.
I met some of them, they weren't great. I met some of them, they seemed really good. They all keep leaving. You know, and again, going back into the investment world, the same thing. Getting overly excited about, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to do this, everything's going to work out perfectly, I'm going to make all this money. And then you can't do what you thought you were going to do, or the city won't let you, or this is, there's more here than you thought. And so almost now it's like you go into these situations, but I don't go in with the blinders on. Like I'm going in, I'm looking at investments, I'm looking at opportunities, and I'm going, okay, this looks good. Now, where could it go wrong? And oh, by the way, even if I think I know all of those things, I'm going to go into this planning that at least 2 or 3 things I'm not even thinking about right now are going to go wrong.
Yeah.
Because they typically do.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm going into this scenario situation knowing that when those things happen, not only A, can I handle them, but also I'm not getting as turned or bent or derailed when they do.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's like, I didn't see that, but it's a problem. But I went into this expecting to see a few problems.
Yes.
Instead of, I went into this, now there's a problem, and it's like, man, I can't believe this, or I'm getting screwed, or man, it's like people start down that, and I watch this. And so I have an executive assistant, her name's Joy, she's great, but there's a lot of times where I'm dealing with a situation or a person, and later she'll say, man, after I saw you deal with that situation, like, that was really neat the way that you said that or did this thing. And it was like, because I realize a lot of times where I'm like, well, what did you expect working with this person about this thing, right? Where I'm like, I'm owning it on the inside. I'm like, okay, I'm here. This person's being irrational or they're being emotional. I can be right all day, but that's not going to get us where we want to go. So I'm going to have to go in here. I'm going to navigate this sticky situation or personality or thing to get an end result, because I can't get derailed. If the goal is to go from A to B, I can't be halfway there and all of a sudden running down a bunny trail about I'm right and someone else is wrong, or this never should have happened to me, or this person, didn't do their job. All the people not doing their job is going to happen all the time.
It's something I've seen you do maybe better than anybody else I've ever met. Is like
Get angry.
Hide my anger? Hide your anger? Like stuff it deep down?
I'm really good at it.
Take it out of the gym? Like, it's great. No, but I've watched you navigate these situations where, and we've done deals where you're like, here's the end result. Like, it's a no-brainer. Everything's like perfect. It's all rainbows and unicorns. And then that
it doesn't
never happen. But to watch you navigate all of these
never, I want to say never.
Never. But watch you navigate without losing sight of this, and watch you, even just the way that you show up with a calm demeanor, watching other people spool up and then realize they're not going to get mirrored and matched.
Yeah.
And then for it to dissipate. It's really amazing to watch.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm not quite sure what you're talking about, but no, I know what you're saying in theory, and I don't know that I overthink a lot of it when it's happening. I think I just have a good, again, I follow a lot of Stoic kind of teachings, but that whole, there's things in your control, there's things out of your control. But then there's also the fact that one of the things that I think Stoics have to realize is like, you can be Stoic, but nobody else is. And you still have to deal with that.
Yeah.
Stoically. And that's another teaching lesson, right? And I go back, agents, my kids, whatever, but effectiveness is what I think I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm trying to keep my eye on the prize, but I'm like, what am I going to do to be effective in this situation? And melting down isn't effective. Getting angry isn't effective. Treating this person poorly isn't effective. Getting into a debate isn't effective. Like, so even though I have these urges or want to, it's like, hey, listen, the most effective thing I can do in this moment is keep my wits about me, stay calm, cool, and collected, keep moving forward, deal with the situation the best I can. And it still might end up with some feelings hurt or angry, but I'm also like, I'm not going to get derailed, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's one of those, maturity things. I don't think a 26-year-old Keith was like a 43-year-old Keith. I don't think a 35-year-old Keith was. Yeah, I definitely, there was a few mic drops and a few bad emails that were probably written. And
felt so good. Like, it's like, that's all the value that's going to give me.
That really helped. That city planner loves you now. That's great. You proved your point. No, it's one of those weird teaching moments throughout life. As you said, you go through these journeys and it's like, why should people listen to you? And I'm like, I don't know why, like, I can put my thumb on it, but it's those kind of things, right? Mm-hmm. It's just that I can telepath a situation a little bit better than I ever used to be able to.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping I can telepath even better in another 20 years, or another 15 years. But I think that's one of the benefits of success over time is it does get a little easier to be successful if you stay in your game plan. Like, right, if you can keep those fundamental attributes, if you work hard, if you stay calm under pressure, if you're willing to take some risks or assess risks, if you're not going to let fear get in your way, keep your eye on the end goal, right? Navigate. If you do get derailed, don't get derailed. Those are all these kind of little life lessons that I think, it makes it a little bit easier for me to make money now or for me to be successful now than it ever was before.
Sure.
Because again, even if it goes to zero tomorrow, that's that whole adage or that question of like, hey, could you rebuild it in half the time you built it before? And I think the answer for me is yes, right? I don't think it would take me nearly as long to rebuild if I had to. And this is another thing, again, which gives you a little bit more confidence, which makes you look at fear a little bit different, which keeps you moving forward because all of those things kind of build on each other and compound.
All right, guys, hopefully that part one was as amazing as it was for me, for you. Keith's amazing. And so, as always, we are here to impact, empower, encourage you and all things that you do. And look forward to part 2 coming soon.
All right, we'll see you guys on part 2.